Magomed Ankalaev staked his claim at a possible next number one contender for Alex Pereira's light heavyweight title on Saturday night at UFC Vegas 84 in the Apex. He took out Johnny Walker by knockout in round 2 and marches forth into a possible showdown with the champion, as we said. Co-main event, we've seen Jim Miller pick up a great win and other good wins throughout this card, which we'll break down on the balance breakdown over the course of the next hour. Thanks everybody for joining us. Harry Powell is with me today to help me along the first UFC card of the year, the first installment. If you like what you hear, hit the like button, hit the share button, hit the subscribe button, leave a comment underneath. Do you agree with what we say? Do you disagree with what we say? We're interested to hear what you think about these fights and about any of it, anything that we talk about really on this. It really helps us out if you do share with a friend and, help us on the old algorithm side of things. Harry, I'm not even going to go for the breakdown. We're going to go straight into it. Straight in, no kissing tonight. Magomed Ankalaev went in and took out Johnny Walker in you know what? In style. I'm going to say it, in style. I was impressed by his performance. We saw glimmers of what we seen in the first fight. We highlighted a couple of things, that we seen could have been different from the first fight itself. Basically my first question for you is, what are the big differences or what are the big similarities that we've seen from the first fight, from the second fight that we've seen, apart from the obvious finish in round 2, which was, the fight was technically finished. Oh no, it was in round 1 the first time via legal strike. But, we didn't have to get the referee in. We didn't have to get the doctor in. We didn't have to get nobody in. We had to get the doctor in after the fight for poor Johnny Walker, all right, and his nose was in bits. But I'm curious to hear your thoughts on the performance.
Magomed Ankalaev realized in the first fight that he didn't need wrestling. That's what we found out. He realized that the striking was going to be technical enough, and if he put enough pressure on Johnny Walker, that Johnny Walker would revert back to who Johnny Walker is. And that's exactly what happened. Johnny Walker was put under pressure. Nice jabs from both of them. A strong enough start from Johnny Walker, but both of them were letting their hands go. However, Johnny loves hook kicks, axe kicks, knees, spinning back fists, all of these types of things. And when you're somebody like Magomed Ankalaev, who I had two thoughts in this fight. One, he is levels above Johnny Walker. Mm-hmm. And second, that I think Alex Pereira absolutely flattens him. But Magomed Ankalaev got away with just shuffling his feet forward, keeping his hands roughly around his chin, jabbing, teeping, and low kicking his way, and just destroyed Johnny Walker inside a round, really. Because by the time the second round had started, Johnny was pretty deflated. Deflated. Now, the reason why I say that is because the end of the first round was Magomed landing really nice low kicks, and Johnny had started to stand a little bit more upright and shuffle his feet a little bit more, was less bouncy on his feet. As he comes out in the second round, what does he throw immediately? A fucking axe kick. And I'm like, cool. He already knows. He already knows that this isn't going 5 rounds, and he already knows that he's going to have to try and catch Magomed Ankalaev with something crazy in order to either equal this up and get some respect from Magomed Ankalaev, or just knock him out. Mm-hmm. And Magomed just went right back to where he was in the first round. He built more confidence through the early stages of the second round and just caught him in the inside space where Johnny was too willing to be bunched up and have his elbows too close to the inside space. And Magomed just lands big hooks, right hook drops him, and then shades of Luke Rockhold, Yoel Romero with that shovel uppercut, shades of Holly Holm versus Betch Correia uppercut, and just decimated Johnny Walker's poor face.
Devastating. Look, we said in the severe setup last week that, looking back at this first fight, we both kind of agreed that Johnny Walker at times found himself too square in front of Ankalaev. And I think what you suggested is in round 1 that, he kind of corrected those mistakes in his activity. He was in and out. But like I said it on the big podcast, I'll say it again here now. Who in 2024 is going to throw a fucking axe kick and believe it's number one, going to land flush, and number two, going to knock out your opponent. It's absolutely ridiculous. It's wasteful. And, pretty much the same can be said about those hook kicks, about those spinning heel kicks. Obviously have a better chance of landing and doing more damage, but you're probably walking in there at 220 pounds. You cannot be throwing that level of at that level of aggression or carelessness without having it without those strikes having an effect on your cardio tank. And we seen it towards the end of round one. It was like you said, a deflated Johnny Walker. He was like, oh man, I've kind of hung in here for 5 minutes, and Ankalaev is just the same old guy coming out for round two as he was for round one. Very calm, very composed, and did land that big overhand right, which set up and put Johnny on his ass, and followed up with that big, massive uppercut, which appeared to shatter the nose of Johnny Walker. Two devastating blows. But the overall point for that is that original overhand right that landed at the start of round two actually did catch Johnny Walker square again. And he kind of undid all of the hard work. And we're at this place again with Johnny Walker, Harry, where we're trying to find this fine line between the madness and the composure and the technique. He just doesn't find it at the right times. I think a cooler, calmer, composed Johnny Walker there would have put up much better of a fight against Magomed Ankalaev on Saturday night. Would you agree?
Probably not. Like I think where I am now is my breakdown of Johnny Walker is, if he chooses that he wants to be a martial artist, then he should continue down this path. He should continue down the path of trying to bridge the line of being technically proficient and making the right decisions and doing all of these things and trying to be the best fighter he can be. But at the age he is, and at the position he is now, which is like this weird twilight in that, even in a light heavyweight division where you need one fight to get yourself back into the title picture, at least, he either goes on the line of the martial artist and he continues down the path, as I've just said, or he just goes right back to the mad bastardry. And he either goes out on a shield and he goes out in vastly exciting fights, or he goes out and he highlights real people. Because it's obvious that there are elements of his game that have not progressed quick enough, and that aren't going to be progressing quick enough in order for him to continue to compete at the elite level right now. Age is not on his side, even in a light heavyweight division. And when he attempts to go one way or the other, maybe this is too outlandish of me to say, but I'm saying it because that's my opinion. When he goes down this route, what happens is Magomed Ankalaev happens. A guy that isn't the best fighter in the world. I don't think he beats Alex Pereira, and maybe we get to that in a second, but he has enough in a jab, a little bit of shuffle footwork, tucking his chin, and a teep to decimate Johnny Walker. That's a gap that you're just not going to bridge in the time that you have left in the sport.
I describe both of these guys as one as championship material and the other simply not championship material. Now, being championship material doesn't mean you're going to go on and win the title, but you go on the run that Magomed Ankalaev has gone on in the light heavyweight division, which is like 9-10 wins in a row. You deserve to get that title shot. You do class yourself as championship material, but getting there is one thing. Getting over the line and becoming the champion is another thing. And look, you've kind of stressed what you think about the Alex Pereira versus Magomed Ankalaev fight. Ankalaev, or maybe more so probably Ali Abdelaziz, went out on Twitter and said that told Alex not to even bother trying to train grappling ahead of this fight, that he's going to stand in front of him and he is going to try and knock him out. And we know what happened to Sean Strickland the last time that was tried, so it'll be interesting. An even bigger set of balls to go out there and actually do that with a guy like Alex Pereira. You just think he's too big, too powerful, and has too much knockout power to get through Ankalaev. Is that what you're kind of saying, if the two of these kind of matched up?
I just think the jab is too cultured. I think the power is too thudding. And I think because Magomed Ankalaev is somebody that isn't the most dynamic in terms of the footwork on the feet, he does shuffle a little bit. His feet are planted a lot of the time. Alex Pereira's leg kicks are going to destroy his legs. And then when those legs are starting to go, the answer is only going to be grappling. The answer is only going to be he has to shoot. And you best believe that, they have been looking at Magomed Ankalaev and the threats that he poses for a while, right? Of course, Glover Teixeira is not an idiot. He knows what he's doing, right? He knows what this division looks like. He knows what this division is. And so for somebody like Glover Teixeira as the head coach of Alex Poatan Pereira, it is obvious that they are going to make sure that they are doing their absolute best to make sure that Poatan can keep this on the feet, and if he does get taken down, to survive down there. But I maybe I'm wrong, right? Maybe Magomed Ankalaev has shades of Sean Strickland, where he's more awkward than he looks, and he's more, tricky and weird when he's actually in front of you. But the footwork, to me, I wrote it in my notes here. I said the low leg kick of Magomed is nice, but I do feel like Poatan is going to chew the fuck out of this walking stance. That's the sentence I wrote, right? And I just think he will. I just think those legs come too close together and he shuffles too much, and that's going to be a significant problem.
Yeah, I think the same. I'm not going to disagree with you at all there. I think Alex Pereira does have that style. To be honest, whether Ankalaev wants to take him down or whether he doesn't, I think that we've seen some glimmers of that takedown defense. I mean, we're not expecting Alex Pereira to go out there now and look like a D1 wrestler or anything like that. What Alex Pereira needs to do is what, Glover Teixeira does, being able to control where the fight goes and defending those takedowns. What his predecessors at the pit done. Chuck Liddell made his whole career off of that sprawl and brawl. And I would expect that will happen in the Ankalaev fight. Johnny Walker, what's next for him, Harry?
I really don't know. The loser of Rakic Pahachka, maybe.
Yeah. That makes sense. That makes sense. Yep. It'd be interesting, but I mean, are you? Let's leave it at this, right? Last question: are you completely throwing the book out on Johnny Walker being able to put certain things together to get himself back up there in title contention again?
No, but he never wins a title.
Mm-hmm. He can get at least a shot. I believe he can as well, but I think
that speaks more to the division though than to my belief in his skills.
Yeah, I think so too. It is a kind of a weak division right now. But moving on, let's do it to the co-main event. Jim fucking Miller, what a man! The winner of the first inaugural Fair Play of the Week award went to Jim Miller after his destruction of Gabriel Benitez, taking him out in round 3 with a face crank / rear naked choke, whatever you want to call it. But he was out there doing Jim Miller things, still getting the job done in 2024. There was one thing, and I kind of said on the big podcast that I'm going to send to you as well, Harry, and that is I was listening to Jim Miller talking ahead of this fight on Fight Week. And it was an absolute pleasure listening to him because, you listen to a lot of guys and there's nothing but shit that spews out of their mouth. But with Jim Miller, well thought out, very kind of aware of his current situation and the situation that's developing around him. But he was asked about Tony Ferguson. And Tony Ferguson said about Tony Ferguson that Tony Ferguson needs to go out there and fight like the Tony Ferguson of today and not the Tony Ferguson of the last 5 or 10 years. And, that mentality is something that Jim Miller brings into the octagon right now. We're not seeing a Jim Miller that we've seen 5 years ago or 10 years ago. We're seeing the Jim Miller of 2024, a guy who has adjusted to this base level of skills, but is still acquiring some skill acquisition. I mean, he went out there and kicked the calves out of Gabriel Benitez there. When Jim Miller was first on the scene, no one had heard or tell of a calf kick in mixed martial arts. So that just shows the level of intelligence a guy like Jim Miller has, the level of awareness that he has around his own set of skills. And both of those are a recipe in really the type of fighter that he is today and why he's so successful and still winning fights in 2024 inside the UFC.
I can't talk about Jim Miller without just gleaming, right? Like gleaming with pride. This is what the UFC should all be about. It really, really is. We should be focusing our attention on people like Jim Miller, people like Mario Bautista, people like Marcus McGhee, as we'll talk about later on in the card. But this is, it was just a wonderful performance. Benitez absolutely brought it to Jim Miller, absolutely brought it. But Jim Miller just showed, like you just said, he showed the things that we love about him, right? The toughness, the grit, the determination. But he also showed some wrinkles that he's obviously been working on that other people just don't do, right? Other fighters just don't do. You see Jim Miller fighting from situations that people generally don't fight from. Immediate exchanges, immediate like breaks from the clinch. He's fighting immediately. He's throwing immediately. He's throwing shots to the head. He's throwing shots to the body. In grappling exchanges where people are favoring control, he's looking for damage. When people are getting to their feet or he's getting to his feet, he's looking to land damage at all times. And I think that is him being cognizantly aware of what the judging criteria is right now. It's all about damage. He knows that he's not the biggest hitter in the world anymore, right? He hasn't got the level of muscle power or muscle density that he maybe had at 25, and he can't just spark lads with one shot. But what we also saw is some really, really wonderful additions of technical form and technical skill. You mentioned the leg kick, and I was going to bring that up. Like the right hook to low leg kick was absolutely destroying Gabriel Benitez the entire fight. And it wasn't just the combination that he threw, it was the way that he threw it. So he went left-hand jab. So that's already his shoulders are turned from one side to the other, right? His left shoulder is protruding. So his core is engaged. As he throws the right hook, he's leaning his weight towards the right-hand side to take his head off the center line. He's torquing his body. His shoulders are switching again. So there's more power transitioning through his core. And then the left low kick, he's leaning already towards his right hand side. So as that left low kick comes in, he's throwing it across his hips through his core. He's got the rotational power of both the jab and the hook, and then he's throwing it straight across his body with his weight leaning to the right hand side already. And it's just a lashing kick, and he was smashing Gabriel Benitez with that left kick. And man, you just smile watching him. You just smile. This is a man who at 350 years old, he's as old as Gandalf is, and he's still going out and adding strings to the bow. And man, just ultra impressive.
A breath of fresh air, one might say, is Jim Miller. He marches forth onto UFC 300, Harry, deservingly so, creating history as the only guy that really will compete UFC 100, 200, and 300. Fingers crossed all goes to plan for him, of course, that he heals up and gets that opportunity. I know you had a couple of ideas about fighters that you wanted him to face, but we have had some breaking news if you want to share that with anyone who may have missed it.
We have indeed, yeah. So on my list, I had Jim Miller to fight either Matt Brown or Paddy Pimblett at UFC 300. Matt Brown because what a fucking fight that is, and Paddy Pimblett because Jim Miller deserves the rhetoric that would be following around Paddy Pimblett. I think one, Jim Miller would probably win that fight, and two, Paddy Pimblett would elevate that fight in terms of eyes on it and media attention and whatever. And again, Jim Miller deserves that for UFC 300. Now, the breaking news is that Jim Miller will be fighting Bobby Green. Dana White, I guess we're breaking the fourth wall as we do every single episode. We are recording this on a Tuesday evening, Wednesday morning, Tuesday evening. Dana White has just broken the news that Bobby Green will be fighting Jim Miller at UFC 300. I really hope that they have an alternate for that one, because I don't see Jim Miller missing weight or not making the fight. Bobby Green is somebody that generally makes the fight as well, right? But I just want to make sure that Jim Miller is absolutely walking out at UFC 300. I think it would be a crying shame if Jim Miller did not walk out at UFC 300. I don't think it's going to happen, right? But I would have loved for them to make Jim Miller co-main event for whatever it is, outside the title fight, whatever it is. Because if I was Jim Miller, right, I'm retiring at UFC 300. I'm, talking about going
absolutely on. Yeah, that absolutely, man. And look, as you said, the co-main event slot might be a little bit unrealistic, but could we put him in the early prelims headliner? Put him on live TV, bulk up that undercard there, and give him the shine that he deserves coming in here. I mean, the whole kind of build up to the fight markets themselves, the only guy that's competed in 100, 200, and now 300. It's a fantastic story, and fantastic stories are hard come by in mixed martial arts. So look, it'll be up to the UFC to see what happens there. Hopefully they'll make something happen and make it a little bit more special for Jim Miller heading in there to UFC 300. But there was a special moment for Mario Bautista. Unless you have anything else to add, shall we move on, sir? Yeah, perfect. Mario Bautista went out there and took home a unanimous decision over Ricky Simon. Is on a quite impressive win streak now in the bantamweight division, and talent is not is in abundance, I should say, in the 135-pounder division. And Bautista somewhat staked his claim against, Ricky Simon, who's not easy to go out there and get a win against, and he did it rather impressively. Close fight. Curious to hear your thoughts.
The time is now for Mario Bautista. The time is now. 135 pounds is by far the best division in any sports organization in the world right now. It is absolutely unbelievable. And not only is it so skill packed and every single fighter is phenomenal. You've mentioned before, we've said before, at 125 and 135, it's almost impossible to make a bad fight, right? And here in this one, just an absolute phenomenal performance by both of them, frankly. I was mostly impressed by Bautista's ability to stop the takedown and then to reverse the takedown, get back up from underneath Ricky Simon. He was using a couple of things that were fantastic. The first was the shoulder crunch and the pinch front headlock. He was doing that to make sure that Ricky was not able to progress that crossface and or the underhook that he was going to be using on Bautista. So he used that anchoring grip to then begin to move his hips to pommel butterfly hooks in. When he got to butterfly hooks, he was just creating a space and getting back up. And that was really, really nice use of grappling to actually initiate space exchanges rather than just playing guard and whatever. And the other was using that pinch front headlock to then start what's called kipping, which is how do I explain kipping? It's a short pulsing movement of your hips to create space underneath your opponent to then start.
I thought you were going to say it was a quick nap. Having a quick...
Yeah, sure. I mean, Jesus, I'd love a fucking nap. But
I bet you would at the time of night it is.
But yeah, Mario Bautista,
kipping in about 20 minutes or so.
Give us half an hour. It was just incredibly impressive. The one critique I will give him is that sometimes that there's an echelon change, right? There's a criteria change. When you move from the lower levels of the top 15 into the upper levels of the top 15, there are certain things that you have to carve out of your game. The mad spinning shit, the wild shit, it needs to stop now, right? It needs to stop because that is where you are going to get clipped and hurt. How many times did we see him throw a weird axe kick or a spinning kick here, there? Ricky Simon caught him in midair at one point with a flying knee and just dumped him. The second time he hit him with a clip right hook that dropped him, flash knockdown after a spinning whatever. Get rid of that stuff and only go with the absolute mad bastardry of bodywork, leg kicks, his own takedown offense. The jabs, the straight shots were just gorgeous from Bautista. And man, I was impressed with both of them. It was a phenomenal fight. But Bautista, to me, has now solidified that he absolutely, undoubtedly, bona fide needs a name in his next one.
Well, you get a win over Ricky Simon, you're most certainly, who is a name, let's be real. It's about as big a name as you can get outside the top 15, I guess. And, you're coming in there to a shit hot division, a shit hot top 15. I'm maybe Ricky Simon is in the top 15. I don't know. I'm not looking at the rankings. Maybe. Yeah. But look at, like I said, will he be able to kind of make those adjustments? Because if he doesn't, he's going to have a rocky road ahead of them. Coming in 6 fights on the trot with a win for Mario Bautista. Who do you want to see him in there next with, Harry?
So I got two names because look, he's 10 fights deep in the UFC and he's 30 years old. Right? Now's the time. Right? If we really, really, really want to push him, Umar Nurmagomedov is still without an opponent. So let's fucking see that fight. If not, Jonathan Martinez is ranked 1 above him. Let's do that one because everyone else is booked. And so if we get him, I mean, he took a little bit of damage in that fight, so maybe he wants a 3 months off or whatever it is. But if not, if he wants a quick enough turnaround, then bang him on the UFC 300 card against Jonathan Martinez. And let's see one of the winners of a Corey Sandhagen or a Piotr Jan or whoever it is.
Where is Bautista on the rankings there now? You have them in front of you?
I do not have them in front of me. Let me pull them up for you very swiftly, sir.
Yeah, interesting enough for Ricky Simon. I mean, it's back to the drawing board for Ricky Simon, really.
Ricky Simon is 15 and Mario Bautista is ranked 14. Umar Nurmagomedov at 13, Jonathan Martinez at 12. Almost everyone else is booked in that division, though.
Yeah, it makes sense to kind of line up one of those fights that you said then as well. And looking for Ricky Simon, it's back to the drawing board. Losses against Song Yadong and Mario Bautista. these things happen.
I do.
It'll be interesting to see. I don't know if you have a name for him or if you want to suggest
have a name for him.
It's going to be an unranked guy any which way. Like, I mean, let's maybe, we'll talk a little bit about Farid Basharat in just a moment. Why don't we? Yeah.
There is a name, and his name starts with Farid and it ends with Basharat.
Well, there we go. We're on the same wavelength when it comes to that. Anyway, good win for Mario Bautista. Back to the drawing board for Ricky Simon. Phil Hawes versus Bruno Ferreira. This
is there a man that gets knocked out worse than Phil Hawes?
Oh gosh, Johnny Walker gets knocked out pretty impressively, although he wasn't knocked out instead. But like Phil Hawes,
he looks like he dies every time.
If he goes impressively. Yeah, it's a good assessment. But he was the master of his own downfall, really, here, Harry, in this fight, wasn't he?
It's just horrendous fight IQ. Like, it's just horrendous. One of the first exchanges, I noted it down. I put Ferreira's looking for a knee. And then 2 seconds later, I wrote Ferreira's still looking for that knee. 5 seconds later, Ferreira's still looking for that knee. And then he's dead on the floor. Like, it's just neither performed well here for me. Phil Hawes should have seen the knee coming. He should have done a better job of just keeping on the outside, working behind a jab, working behind his low kick, and then crowding Ferreira with wrestling exchanges rather than coming inside and collar tying and these sorts of things. And Ferreira is just too wild. He's just way too wild. Look, he lands the knee, great. Phil Hawes goes down, he finishes him, fine, whatever. But you're not going to get away with that against better competition in that division. You're just not. Like, you're just not going to get away with it. And Phil Hawes is a sad story, to be honest, because I don't think he's a bad fighter at all. I really don't.
Johnny was saying that too on the big podcast. It's like he hasn't. Sean was even saying, look, that was. I'd be surprised if we see him in the UFC after this, to be honest. But he's a guy that would make some waves in the PFL. Something like that. But it just hasn't worked out for him. It's like, look, you're coming in here, and I said it, you're coming in here against Bruno Ferreira, Harry, against a guy who has had multiple knockouts, 7 knockouts in 10 fights before this. Now it's 8 knockouts in 11 fights and 11 wins for Bruno Ferreira. You can't stand in front of a guy and look to try an exchange here. And that's exactly what Phil Hawes did, and he was made to pay. But look, that's not to the disparagement of Bruno Ferreira. He got the job done. He found a way. He's right in the mix there at 185. Is there anybody you'd like to see him in there next with?
Roman Kopylov.
Ooh, you're a guy. You're right, Roman.
Spam bullshit techniques. Let's see which one works. Cheers.
Let's do it. I'm going to save you the grief of talking about this next one. I'll kind of cover it and briefly. We're getting the waved arm of death here, but just to cover for anyone who hasn't seen it, Waldo Cortes-Acosta picked up a unanimous decision win over Andrei Arlovski, 29-28 on all 3 judges' scorecards. The fight was as to be expected, really. Your typical Andrei Arlovski fight is going to be a boring decision at this stage of his career. And you know what? More luck to him. Fair play to him. If there was a co-fair play of the week award, it would definitely go to Andrei Arlovski for this, because he's still out there, Harry, in 2024 and earning bank going in there and fighting these guys. Waldo Cortes-Acosta was the quicker fighter, landed with greater impact in this fight, where Arlovski was just, that savvy, experienced kind of nature that kept him just out of trouble in this one. Waldo Cortes-Acosta was out dancing in front of him, laughing and taking the piss out of him. And I'm like, you're here fighting a really close fight here against a guy in his mid-40s that was UFC champion before you probably were even born. Have a little bit of fucking respect, number one. And number two, if he does that against anybody else that has anything about them at all in the heavyweight division, he's going to get knocked the hell out. Look, I said it on the big podcast, I had Waldo Cortes-Acosta to win this fight, and for the fight to go over 2.5 rounds. And I was still hoping he was going to get beat. I was happy to throw away my money the way he fought this fight. Just super frustrating and really not worthwhile at all. So Harry didn't watch this fight, and I wouldn't blame him for not watching it either. That's where I'll come in and kind of ease your troubles. You have a point to make, though?
All I was going to say is Derek Lewis or Sergey Spivak next. Just get him out of there.
Let's get him out of there. Yeah, he's a fucking joker. Matthew Semelsberger, Preston Parsons is the next one we're going to stop at, Harry. I thought you know, on paper, previous performances, I thought this was Semelsberger's fight to take, to be honest. And he didn't have it his own way against Preston Parsons. Look, it was a competitive fight. Preston Parsons took it by unanimous decision, 30-27 on all three judges' scorecards. On paper, it looks like one-sided. Wasn't all that one-sided. Lots of momentum shifts in this one, Harry. I'm curious to hear your thoughts.
So I questioned 30-27 when I watched it first. I thought the first round was closer than a 30-27, and I scored the first round. Did I score the first round to semi? I think I probably lent more towards Matthew Semelsberger than I did for Preston Parsons. I just think he looked a little bit better on the feet. But rounds 2 and rounds 3 were wonderful performances from Preston Parsons, frankly. Really, really, really wonderful. I was very impressed with the wrestling exchanges. I was very impressed with, sometimes I don't like it when fighters get an ego in a fight. If they get taken down and they're like, fuck it, I've got to take him down now. I've got to fucking take him down. I've got to take him down. Yeah. And they get carried away with that. But Preston Parsons came in and said, oh, you want to do wrestling things? No problem. We'll do wrestling things. And picked up semi, which we don't see very often, slammed him into the mat a couple of times, dominated in the wrestling exchanges demonstrably in the 3rd round, had him mounted, had him smashed up. Lovely, lovely, lovely work. Some really nice Kimura attempts in the 3rd round too. But I was very, 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 really, very, 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 really. Jesus, sorry, I'm flagging it. Very with Preston Parsons' ability in the 2nd round to keep his ranges. When he was in, he was all the way in. He was at the hips of Semelsberger. He wasn't giving Semelsberger the ability to be his general athletic self. And when he was pinning him, everything was pinning either at the wrist ride level or he was pinning him at the hips. One of the things we've seen with Semelsberger before is he's such an athlete, so explosive. He's able to pop out of these positions with real aplomb. And that just didn't happen against Preston Parsons. When it did happen and when he was building, he was immediately following Semelsberger's hips, which I thought was really, really, really nice to see. So fair play to Preston Parsons. He really seemed like he turned a corner in this one.
Yeah, definitely did. Like, Semelsberger will go in there and try and drown his opponents. He tried to do that with Parsons. It didn't work. And he saw himself on the receiving end of that unanimous decision, obviously enough. Well-deserved from Preston Parsons. At 170, is there anybody you'd like to see Parsons in with going forward, Harry?
Muktibek Orolbai made his UFC debut recently, got a really, really nice finish, a check left hook, I believe, against the fence. And then I don't know whether Muktibek is going to drop down to 155 because I think it was a short notice welterweight performance. But if it wasn't and he chooses to stay at welterweight, I would like to see that fight.
Indeed. Yeah, that would be an interesting fight. And we'll see what happens when it comes to that. Look at the severe spotlight. It's shone on Marcus McGhee, the first one of 2024. Harry, I'm going to send it straight over to you. A really impressive performance from Marcus McGhee. His 3rd win in a row, I believe, inside the UFC. Yep. And a guy that's not just going in there and winning, he's going out there and finishing these guys as well. And this was a super performance from the man.
Similar to Jim Miller, there's an air of mastery, confidence, and mastery, humility that comes from Marcus McGhee, right? I think when you get to a level of maybe experience just in life, but experience in a specific field, there's less that you have to prove to yourself, and you can be comfortable in and around certain situations. And that's generally what we see from fighters that I think we gravitate towards in certain aspects anyway. Marcus McGhee has that in spades. In and around fight week, in and around fighter hotels, he seems very respectful. He's often got nice things to say about his opponents. He very rarely talks trash in a disrespectful way, right? He's obviously confident. He wants to go in and win fights. He wants to go in and win well. And when he does go in, he hits like a fucking Mack truck. I was so impressed here with the overarching game plan from Marcus McGhee. Immediately it was, we cannot let Bolanos settle. We know that he's a good striker. We know that he's a storied kickboxer. And so we have to change the rhythm at all times. And that's exactly what McGhee did. He was constantly switching stances. He was constantly offering different looks. He was constantly changing the ranges, both from a striking perspective, with his hands, with his level change feints, with his movement. And then eventually, when he started to land, he landed with absolute aplomb. And I was so impressed with his ability to mix in grappling. When he did strike, he struck well. He was confident, and he just tore Bolanos up. He just absolutely tore Bolanos up. And I was very impressed, as always, with a fighter that is willing to be cognizant and aware enough that when he landed that first right hand that wobbled Bolanos drastically, he took a step back, put his hands up, looked at the referee and said, I don't need to do any more. I don't need to do any more. Now, fair play. Bolanos was very gritty, very, very, very tough. Got back up and said, no, I'm still here. Let's go, let's go, let's go. Now Marcus McGhee had to do what he did. Forced Bolanos to take the right-hand exit, threw a spinning hook kick, wobbled him, dropped him again. Not dropped him again, but wobbled him again, with another right hand. And thankfully, Mark Smith stepped in and had a beautiful stoppage. Really, really nice stoppage. Very, very impressive. No need to see fighters get KO'd unconscious on the floor. We don't need to see Phil Hawes every single finish. But generally for Marcus McGhee, again, at 33 years of age, the time is now. If we're going to...
we got to get moving.
The time is now.
You got to get him moving. Who do you have him against next?
Victor Henry.
Oh, that's interesting. Is that getting him moving enough, though? I would argue.
So my argument is, he is somebody I want to see him. I want to see him. Only 3 fights in the UFC, and I understand he's 33. I would like to see him have a Victor Henry. He wins a Victor Henry, and then we have a name near the end of the year.
Yeah,
I just need to see a little bit more, because in the 135-pound division, there's no two ways, right? You're either in that like immediate pool of guys fighting for a name, or you're in and around the big dogs. And I think for Marcus McGhee, let's do Victor Henry, because he's a good, solid fighter in Victor Henry. If he beats Victor Henry, then we have 4 wins behind, and it's harder for the guys above him to turn him away.
Absolutely, yeah. Couldn't have said it better myself. Moving on, another fight in the 135-pound division. Farid Basharat versus Taylor Lapilus. Another unanimous decision here. Another 30-27 on all 3 judges' scorecards. Doesn't quite tell the story of this fight, though, Harry. A lot closer on paper and a lot closer watching. There's arguments to be made there for scoring Lapilus a couple of rounds in this fight. I'm curious to hear your breakdown of it. I thought the one thing that stood out for me in this fight was Taylor Lapilus's takedown defense is sensational, and Farid Basharat's unwillingness to give up on that takedown was superb and very well planned out, and was probably the reason that he ended up taking this decision in the long run. We see a lot of fighters when they're unable to take fights down that they'll simply just give up on that, but Farid Basharat didn't really do that in this fight. He kept that takedown, he kept pushing forward, and towards the end of the second round into round 3, he started getting success, and that was the winning of the fight for him in what was a really close contest for the first 1.5 rounds. And the gap separated them a little bit as it kind of went on into the later stages. Curious to hear your thoughts.
I was very, very, very impressed at the game plan of Farid Basharat. We discussed this, you just mentioned it, but there is something that is very interesting, which is Farid came out and just kicked and kicked and kicked and kicked and kicked and kicked in those first sort of 30 seconds. And that's a really interesting game plan to try to stray Lapilus away from the jab. Now, it didn't work. That Lapilus jab landed over and over and over again. That Lapilus jab is a thing of absolute beauty. It's very cultured. It's stinging. It gets in your face, and it causes you big, big, big problems. Now,
a good jab to me is like one that doesn't even look like there's very rarely any wind up to it. It's just one, like you said, that's always there. That's always hitting you. It's taking you off your timing. It's forcing you to reset, and it's doing damage at the same time as well. But Basharat did find a way around it.
100%. And again, I think this is where Taylor Lapilus is not going to get the credit that he deserves in and around the overarching MMA landscape. But that's a very good fighter, a very well-rounded fighter, or definitely UFC caliber. And I hope he sticks around for the next little while, because there are going to be some very interesting fights for him. But for Basharat, very impressed with his willingness to kick, very impressed with his willingness to stand and trade with Lapilus on the feet, and equally to make it an MMA fight. In that second round and third round, I think the thing that was the most interesting to me is Basharat was able to get through the sequences and get Taylor Lapilus to the ground, but then keeping him there in those pinning positions. There was a number of times where you could see Basharat looking to his corner, or like looking around and feeling for those minute angles that Lapilus had taken and was like, I'm not going to be able to pin this fucker. Like, I know I'm not going to be able to pin him. And there were static holding positions, which is not something you see very often in MMA, because Basharat is waiting for Lapilus to try and make a mistake or to try and explode so he can counter. And Lapilus is like, I'm ready to get up whenever you're going to move, big man.
There was a great moment in round 2 where that happened, where Basharat did get in on a double leg, and Lapilus did so well to post, not on the canvas, but post on Basharat's kind of wrist as well. So he was posting to keep his back off the mat, also posting to control, which is fantastic technique. And it was that like that showdown then of who was going to make the move first. And
right.
Lapilus ended up getting up from that, which was like, I was looking at it. There was a slight frustration with me with Lapilus and his unwillingness to let go at times. Now, easier said than done, Harry, when you're talking and you're fighting against a guy like Farid Basharat, in terms of, you know that he's going to want to take you down. You can't overextend yourself on these strikes, or you will find yourself on the bat. But, you know, he could have let go a little bit more. Would you think?
Yeah, so I think the critique I have of Lapilus is you kind of do or you don't. If he's going to try and take you down, you might as well let your hands go. Trust in your ability to get back up. Now, it's a dangerous game plan because it's so much energy expenditure to get back up. So much energy expenditure. You have to be so focused when you're getting back up to make sure you're not giving hooks, you're not giving back control, you're not giving back body locks, you're not allowing Basharat to continue in his offensive cycles. But if you're Lapilus, who is very, very, very good at getting back up, why not try and land a little piece? Now, the answer might be because in rounds 2 and 3, and by the time we got to round 3, Basharat was certainly controlling those grappling exchanges, was having a far easier time of getting him down and keeping him down and doing a bit more damage. But I do think that for Basharat, my critique is it's not enough damage on the ground. It's just not enough. Like, okay, Taylor Lapilus has really good takedown defense, but what happens when we fight Piotr Jan? What happens when we get to that elite level? Like, these fellas are going to have great takedown defense there as well. So we need to prioritize damage or submission offense a little more, I think. Getting to the grappling exchanges, picking up a single, that really nice inside thigh pry to force Lapilus to the ground. The actual takedown sequences are wonderful to watch, and he's got loads of them, but he needs to prioritize keeping his opponent there by ground and pound, submission offense, positional control.
Indeed. Look, we kind of maybe tested the waters a little bit on who we want next for Farid Basharat. Any other suggestions apart from what we've said already, or what are we thinking? Yanez. Yeah, I like that fight. I like that fight for Basharat because it is a winnable fight. Look, I was very high on Yanez. I thought he was my guy to look out for. It hasn't worked out for him. Look, it's still time for it. But yeah, that's another good name. And I mean, names are of an abundance now, Harry, in the 135-pound division. It's the who's who of talent. And, you know, it'll be interesting to see how Basharat progresses. We did see a level up, though, from Basharat in this fight, I believe. And I think we'll continue to see that. But he's going to need to do that as well. I was very impressed with his level of comfortableness on the feet, Basharat, to be honest. You know, he knew that it was going to be tough to get Lapilus down, and you could see he prepared for that as well, obviously with his grappling cardio, but also that leg kick, his willingness to strike. I mean, he got off the more impactful strikes in round 1, early days, and, you know, Lapilus does what he does. He kind of draws you in and makes this a lot closer fight than maybe one would seem. If we were to move on to the 145-pound division, Westin, Wilson, and Jan Silva took him out, didn't waste any time inside 1 round. Were you impressed by this performance, Harry?
Nah, both of them are shit.
Yeah.
I didn't rate either of them. Silva versus Jack Jenkins is a fight I want next because Jack Jenkins will just break the legs of Silva. Silva is awkward and he telegraphs his shots. Wilson, just not a great fighter at all. Both of them probably not UFC caliber. But it was a fight. It happened. Fair play to both lads.
Absolutely. Not too much more to say on that. And you want, what was it, the guy you said you want next? Jack Jenkins. Yeah. It's the leg kick, leg breaker, ain't it? Moving on, 155-pound division. I have a feeling there could be a similar response to this fight than what we heard from Harry in the last fight. Motta picking up the first round win inside just over 1 minute, actually, right crossing ground strikes over Tom Nolan. But, you know, I I fancy Tom Nolan coming into this. I was surprised to see the fight kind of go down this way, but look, at these things do happen in MMA sometimes. Motta picked up the win and moves on. What did you think of this one?
I just thought Tom Nolan didn't get himself started, really. Like, he just threw kicks way too far in range. Like, he was throwing kicks where his knees were landing on the ribs of Motta, and that just means you're way, way, way too close. Like, Motta was giving up a significant reach and height advantage, but he did a really good job of keeping the footwork disciplined enough to keep himself inside and forcing Tom Nolan to either throw or constantly reset in order to try and gather up some ground. Neither fighter is going to do big things in the division, I don't think. Tom Nolan may come back and may be able to give us a little bit more and show us a different kind of side to his game. Maybe, bearing in mind he's very early in his UFC career, maybe these are jitters, these sorts of things. I don't know. There's loads to be said. But the name I have for Motta is Mateusz Rebecki. Both big hitters, both similar style, both similar physical sort of approach to fighting. I think that would be a fun fight.
Absolutely, yeah, I like that one as well. Last but not least, 125-pound flyweight action kicked us off at the start of this card. Joshua Van took on Felipe Bunes. It was Joshua Van that took out Bunes in round 2 by TKO. And what we're seeing here with Joshua Van inside the UFC, Harry, is a guy who is a slow burner inside the octagon. Just because you've got the better of him in round 1 does not mean he's not going to come out guns a-blazing in round 2. We've seen that in his last fight. We've seen that again in this fight. And I don't think it was Brendan Fitzgerald kind of highlighted that and did a good job of highlighting that in this fight. And you're going to have to try and train for the long game when you're going in there and taking on Joshua Van. And, got a good win there, moves to 10-1 and sets up maybe quite a big 2024 for the flyweight. What do you think? What did you think of his performance and moving forward?
So I really liked the first 2 minutes of the first round for Joshua Van, and then it feels like he fades a little piece in the same vein that Tatsuro Taira, was somebody that starts quite slowly and then builds into the first round. It feels like sort of the opposite happens to Van. He goes in, energy's really high, he starts well, and then falls off just a little piece. And then the second round, he gathers himself and comes out and looks great. So that's for him to figure out, right? Either meter the energy down a little piece in that first 2 minutes of the first round, or keep the energy high and carry it on through the 3 minutes, if the extra 3 minutes, if the gas tank allows. But what we're seeing is a guy that's constantly adding skills. I thought the jab was nice. His approach was much, much cleaner. He wasn't throwing too wildly. Really nice initial stuff on the takedown. Okay, he gets taken down eventually, mounted, and then he's eventually in an omoplata. These things are going to happen. Second round, I thought he was really, 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 really good. Really, really good work reversing the clinch, landing lots and lots of damage with those open palm strikes. And I mean, sure, the one thing I will say is Bunes was landing foot stomps. I love me some foot stomps.
I love it.
Clean me up for some foot stomps. But I think the issue with Joshua Van is he is allowing his willingness to land damage and his ability to land damage to mask the lack of technical ability right now. And I think that is something that he has to change. If he is going to progress up the ranks, then there's going to need to be that when we are in a clinch situation, we're not just landing open palm strikes for 15, 25 unanswered shots. We're pummeling an underhook and we're reversing the situation like he did eventually. We're going to need a far greater reliance on technical proficiency that will then lead to damage rather than damage foregoing technical proficiency, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely does. And look at yet was the big word that you mentioned there with Joshua Van. 22 years of age, 10-1, has lots of time here. And it begs the question, what do we do with Joshua Van? Have you seen some early signs that, this guy might be a major player, but inside the flyweight division? I think, if we give him the time, but it all depends on who he's matched up with, because it's killer's row in the flyweight division right now, and there's no easy matchups there for him. What would you like to see next?
I would like to see Joshua Van taking 3 to 4 months between fights and staying in the gym. That's the first thing I would like to see. A loss for Joshua Van, or a couple of losses for Joshua Van, is really not the end of the world. The real problem he's going to have is if he continues to win, the UFC are going to continue to push him. And at 21, 22 years of age, unless you're Magomed Ankalaev or Tatsuto Taira, where, you know, Magomed Ankalaev and Tatsuto Taira are people that I feel like they have the it factor, right? Whereas I don't think Joshua Van has it quite yet. It's something that there's something there, right? There's a little piece, there's a little bit of magic in him. Are we going to be able to cultivate that into something that's going to allow him a long and illustrious career in that 125-pound division? Maybe not, but we will see. The names I have are either CJ Vajera, because we're then going to see CJ Vajera hits quite hard, but is a winnable fight for him. Or what about Jake Hadley?
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, I like that Jake Hadley fight now. I like that a lot. Interesting. Yeah, like it. Well, you've started off 2024, Harry, as you finished off 2023, making up some banging matchups in all divisions. That's the first balance breakdown of the year. We'll be back a little bit later on this week for the severe setup, looking at UFC 297, Sean Strickland versus Dricus du Plessis. We look forward to hearing your thoughts and opinions on this podcast. Like I said, leave a comment. Let us know what you think. If you agree, you disagree, that's up to you. You make the call. We'll gladly answer any questions. And we shall see you in a couple of days for the severe setup. And of course, we'll be back again next week for the balance breakdown. Go over there, follow Harry Powell at BJJ_Harry Powell. Follow Balance Grappling. Share it out on your stories as well. The man is a wizard. He is a wizard. Take care, folks. Bye-bye then.